Good evening. Mark Anglin. Tonight I'm going to give you my assessment, my briefing on Remember the Titans movie. It's about a football team. It's more so than about a football team. It's about a community and a group of people. This is a football I have in my hand. As you can see, it's oblong. It's usually made of leather, has stripes on either end, has the logo of who made this football, and it has the laces. You can throw this thing, you can catch this football, you can kick it, you can drop it, and you can become a winner by playing this game of football. I've fortunately been lucky enough to play football in my lifetime and been able to coach football as an adult. Remember the Titans. This movie set back in 1971 in Virginia when the schools became integrated between Caucasians and African Americans. Very tumultuous time for this city, and the town was brought together by this little thing in my hand called a football. The movie started out with the racial turmoil and tensions between African Americans and Caucasians. Denzel Washington's character, Coach Boone, he was hired to be an assistant coach for the football team. This team was a winning team that he was going on to be an assistant coach with. He was brought in to help integrate the football team. The team had been a championship team for many years prior to Coach Boone's arrival at the location. Well, as the movie went along, it was stated that Coach Boone was not going to just be the assistant coach. He was actually going to be the head coach. So as the plot goes through, Coach Yost, who was the former head coach, he was Caucasian, would now become an assistant coach. He'd been the championship coach for many years. He led the team to championships. He coached many of these children from kids up until the young men that they were becoming in this movie. The movie was a great movie for leadership. You had everything that you could possibly need to learn from leadership. It hit on a lot of points that we've learned in our classes throughout this course of leadership. Coach Boone, in my opinion, his leadership style was, he wore many hats. Probably his most prominent feature as a leader was he was a transformational leader, and he was also an authoritarian leader. Coach Boone, he, in my opinion, utilized the 4 I's that we learned back in week 2 of the transformational leadership theory. Coach Boone, he had the individual consideration. He provided personal contact with people who needed it. He had intellectual stimulation. He encouraged young men who thought they could never go to college to get their grades up to go and apply themselves and become better students. He also was inspirational. He took this team out to Gettysburg, where he stated, for many years people died on this field right here, young men, because of the fight that they were still fighting today with the racial tensions. He was also idealized influencer, where he believed being the model for others to follow. He had a high performance expectation. He stated earlier that this was a dictatorship, and he was the dictator, not a democracy. Coach Boone expected his team to be perfect. One thing I admired about Coach Boone is that as the movie went on, it was noted that he was told by one of the gentlemen who helped hire him as the head coach that the school board was going to give him a shot, but if he lost one game, then he was going to be out as the head coach. Coach Boone went on to state what about his family? I would expect him just to pick up and move on. But the one thing Coach Boone showed, he showed integrity, and he showed courage. He never went back to Coach Yost or the other coaches. He never went to the team and said, "Oh, poor pitiful me, if I lose the game, then I'm out on my head." He kept it close to himself, kept it to his heart, and he motivated this team to become winners. Authoritarian style, transformational style is what I would consider Coach Boone as. Coach Yost, I could see him as being a people-focused leader. He was concerned about the feelings of the children. He was concerned about the feeling of the boys. Coach Boone was made a little bit harsh with some of them. He was take them to the side and talk to them. Coach Boone had to speak with Coach Yost at one point there in the movie and let him know that he was the head coach, and he didn't appreciate the calling him out in front of the team, where he felt like Coach Yost was, coddling the boys, I guess you could say. and later on in the movie, as you saw Coach Yost do the same thing with Petey when he had to get into him a little bit on the game. Petey kind of got down and went on. But Coach Yost, in my opinion, he was more of a people-focused leader. He didn't want to have conflict with the kids, and he wanted them all to get together. Of the followers in this movie, based on Kelly's followership, I would say that Gary Bertier was probably one of the best followers in this movie, along with Julius Campbell. However, Bertier took it one step further. Gary Bertier, in my opinion, under Kelly's followership, was a critical thinking. He was independent in his own views. When it wasn't the right thing for Gary to go off and hang out with his teammates, who happened to be African American, where his Caucasian friends looked at him like he was crazy, Gary went against the grain. He thought independently. He went for himself, and he chose to take his own path. He didn't care about the consequences. He lost his girlfriend over it. Gary continued on his path and his mission to become one team and to become one group of people, not a black person, not a white person, but a person and people. Gary Bertier, this was evident during the one game where the young player named Ray, the other white player, who was classified as D. Martin, along with Jerry Lewis, as Gary was classified in the beginning, when Ray failed to block for the Rev, which ended up being an injury, season-ending injury almost. Gary Bertier took it upon himself to go to Coach Boone and state that he wanted to get Gary off the team. Coach Boone reiterated to him that he did not cut anyone, and that if Gary felt like Ray needed to be cut, then Gary had to go and handle it. Well, Gary stood tall. He stood tall in his shoes. He went out and he told Ray that he's got to go. Ray was wrong. Gary Bertier showed exemplary followership by following Coach Boone's lead. Coach Boone insisted that everyone be perfect. Gary observed that Ray was not perfect, and he knew that Ray was not good for that team, and then he left. Some of the cultural differences they had to put up with, some of the cultural clashes that went on during the movie. Obviously, the obvious was there. You had African Americans and Caucasians who had never been together, never been in the same school system together, never intermingled. The racial turmoil was there. That was a challenge in itself. That was a challenge in itself to get the team to come together and to play as one. Coach Boone was able to utilize his strengths based upon his history, where he was involved with Dr. Martin Luther King. Coach Yost was able to use his, I guess you could say, his Christian background to where he realized that this was the right thing to do and the proper thing to do. The cultural differences was music. Cultural difference was maybe the food, maybe how the kids acted after school, what they did at their homes as opposed to what the other kids did at theirs. Gary Bertier broke the mold, went to go try to play basketball, although his mother grabbed him by the ears, told him he had to go to church. Julius didn't think anything of it. He later showed up at Gary's house, and they became best friends, as we saw in the movie. The cultural differences was something that they had to overcome as a team and as a community in order to get forward and to move past this racial tension. In my opinion, Remember the Titans has everything you need to see. It has Foreman, Storman, Norman, and then the adjourning stage of it. The team was put together, they came together, and then they became one. Remember the Titans, and always remember football. Thank you.